Hello, welcome to another Frog Popstar video. Today we are going to be talking about Dragonflight Tierlist. And now this tier list is from the perspective of more of a PvP thing, more less about RBGs, more arena and such. I have been trying to get into RBGs lately. Like this season, I've been trying to mess with RBGs on Shadowlands, but I'm more of an arena player. But maybe this page I'll be different. But right now we're looking at arenas again. So this tier list is from the perspective of arenas. Of course, tuning has not been done, so this is mostly talking about how fun the classes are and how viable I think the things they have are. Some classes have fundamental problems. Some classes have things about them that are fundamentally strong, and we're going to talk a bit about that today. So first, let's talk about the this tier list doesn't have evokers on it. So this is what I kind of going to use for the DPS and evoker, because I'm not talking about healers or tanks, because that's kind of a different ball game. So the DPS evoker, I think these are real world problems. I'm going to put them in the D tier. And my reason for this, the 25-yard range is just rough. The empower mechanic is brutal for PvP. Assuming the empower mechanic is something that ends up being worth using, which, I believe currently they're tuned in a way that empower is always a DPS loss, like in PvE. But surely it won't go live like that, and if you need to empower your spells for them to be good, that's going to be brutal. Empower is just, you can't be using 4-second casts in PvP all the time. That's terrible. So, empower, the 25-yard range business. The PvP talents don't really fix any of their issues. Some of the PvP talents are good, but they don't, there's not a PvP talent to give them, 15 more yards of range or whatever. So yeah, this is just going to be brutal. They're going to have a very hard time. I don't think they've got some like unique utilities, but I just don't think it's there for these guys. I think if you play as one of these, you're going to be in for it, really. I think you're going to be in for it. Another thing with the PvP talents, it's like they've only got one slot they can really play with, because you're always going to want to play that dispel protection, the kick protection and the CC protection. What are they called? Null Shroud and Obsidian Metal. You're pretty much always going to be running with those, I imagine. So you really only get to pick one PvP talent, and like you could pick kind of one of the fun ones like Chrono Loop, which I think is also going to be pretty good. But this pick just doesn't have it. Also, a lot of their damage, like like Conal Breath attacks and stuff, how are you going to hit those in PvP? And a lot of their stuff can get dispelled, and they've got no dispel protection. So these guys just fundamentally look bad. Now, they are a new class, so like if Blizzard makes their damage completely ballistic, then of course they'll be good. But that's a false good, like that'll get toned down the next patch and they'll be garbage. So these guys need some real changes. Maybe really need some beefy PvP talent. Some of this stuff needs to be baked in, like the dispel protection on the obsidian scales. That should just be part of the spell. That literally doesn't matter for PvE at all. You're almost never going to be getting interrupted in PvE. So it's just, the spec needs it. So, yikes, yeah. Next up, we've got Shadow Priest. And Shadow, it looks like a lot of fun. Its tree provides several ways to deal damage, which I'm going to talk a little about this. Like, a lot of these trees now are providing several ways to deal damage. Like, you'll have a dot path, a single target path, an AoE path, or like a burst path, or a sustained path or something. And this opens up more avenues for the spec to be good. A lot of these specs have it, some of them don't, which is kind of a minus for them. But if they do have it, I think it's pretty huge for them. I think it's really a big deal, honestly. And it's going to really does a lot for them. So Shadow definitely has a lot of options. It also means one of these paths is bound to be good. But it is a little bit hard to determine, because the priest general tree, where they're going to be getting a lot of their utility and such from, is being looked at. So I think this spec is still going to get a lot of changes before it goes live. But so far, it looks promising, it looks interesting, it looks fun. So I put it in A tier. Can be kind of generous. Now we're at Paladin. Here's one that we do not need to be generous with. Rep Paladin looks like it's going to have the same issues that it has had through time. Lots of, you know, the mobility is just going to be a problem again. I don't, I was looking for it. I don't think they've got long arm of the law, or, you know, whatever they call it, where when you judgment, you speed up. That looks like it's not coming back. They're just focusing on the charger mechanic instead, which charger, I don't think charger's a fun mechanic. I don't like having that as, you know, as my mobility spell. I much prefer like charge and shadow step to stuff like that, or like monk's roll or something. So the charger, I personally don't like it at all. The tree is full of AoE, like too much AoE to the point like the single target, like more PvP, you know, kind of arena options are kind of lacking, I think. It's got a lot of dead talents, or talents that aren't going to really do hardly anything for you in PvE, so I'm going to put these in D tier. Not really high hopes for them in arenas, which is not anything super new. You know, when Rep Pally is good, it's good because it's got some sort of one-shot business going on, and Blizzard tends not to let that stay good for long. So Windwalker. Windwalker got a lot of options, a lot of ways to build, which is good. Solid utility as well. I certainly see this being a strong spec. It's able to pick up even more mobility than it's ever had. So it's already one of those mobile specs in the game. Now it can have Tiger Lust, 3 rolls, Flying Serpent Kick. It's just got a lot of mobility. So I think the general tree for it has some awkward moments, especially on like the healing side, which this is kind of something that's plaguing some of the hybrid classes. They've got a general tree where like one row is like DPS stuff and you want all of that every time, and then like the healing and the tanking stuff is just kind of awkward. So it's definitely kind of in that field, but I think this spec's going to be really solid either way. Going to put it in A tier. I don't see this being a bad choice. So now mages, Arcane. All 3 mage specs are getting a lot of CC options. They're all getting Dragon's Breath and this AoE polymorph business, and so some other things. So lots of CC for all 3 of the mage specs. Lots of good CC. I think Arcane, it looks like it's going to have pretty insane burst potential. Its damage still requires a lot of hard casting though, all of which comes from the Arcane school, which is going to keep it out of S tier for me. But I think it's actually looking quite strong. I'm going to put it in A. Arcane, of course, as always, it really comes down to how much damage does Arcane do. And that's just the way it is. Arcane just comes down to tuning, but fundamentally this spec is a little flawed with all the Arcane school stuff. And, you know, polymorph is Arcane, so if you get kicked out of Arcane, you're just kind of chilling. It's not really the best. Frost, you know, just like Arcane, you know, lots of instant CC that it's getting. But I think it is going to struggle with its damage profile. Because if you look at the tree, to me it looks like really the only way they're going to be getting big damage is with Icicle. So Icicle's going to be like centering around your kill windows, and Icicle's a long cast time. Got to do 5 Frost Bolts first. It's just, I think that could be a problem for Frost. So the damage profile I think on Frost is going to be a little bit awkward. We'll see. Maybe there's other builds that, you know, you don't need the Icicle business, Glacial Spike business. But we'll have to just see on that one, okay? Now Fire. Fire, I think, is going to be crazy. All this instant CC is going to be wild for it. It's got lots of instant cast it's able to spec into. So it's just going to be mobile, lots of instants, lots of CCs, and that's just a recipe for a powerful PvP caster. So we're going to put it in S. Destro is getting some more options in its tree. You know, I said I wasn't going to really talk about RBGs, but I think Destro definitely has got some really crazy AoE builds it's going to be able to pull off, and that might be of interest, but I think it's PvP, like its arena builds are going to be limited, probably only having like 1 or maybe 2 paths it can really go down because of all the AoE in the tree. But you know, I still think it's going to be good. So I'm gonna, gosh, I don't know, where should I put this? I'm gonna put it in B tier. because I think it's just going to be so much worse than Demo. Maybe even Affliction. Which Affliction, we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I think it looks okay. But just the tree is just, you know, it's definitely a tree made for PvE. And you can kind of twist that to work for RBGs. But it doesn't seem, you know, I think the days of the hefty Chaos Bolt are over. Which is kind of, when the spec is good in Arena, it's good because of that. So gonna put it there. This might be better than I'm anticipating. The Nether Portal, I think, is quite exciting. It's got Nether Portal, Shadow Burn, a few like instant spells it can use, which is kind of cool. But yeah, not. It just looks so-so. Demo, it's got a lot of build options in the tree, which, and you know, when I say it has build options, it really does have build options, like more than most of the other specs do. Like this, each build option has a very different damage profile. Different, you know, strengths and weaknesses. It's going to be pretty interesting. Lots of ways to play this spec, I think. And yeah, I just think it's going to be really good with all these different ways to build. Surely one of these paths is going to be real good. So we're going to put it in S tier. Affliction. I'm not really impressed with Affliction. It doesn't look terrible or anything, but nothing's really jumping out at me either. It will almost certainly have some good arena comps, but I think it's really going to come down to how the spec is tuned. You know, it's kind of like, does Dispelling Unstable Affliction one-shot you, or does it not matter? Yeah, that's kind of where it comes down to. Also, if the things that are good with it are good, that also has a lot to do with how good Affliction is. But Affliction, you know, you've always got people high on the ladder who are playing this regardless, but I think it's... I'm not really impressed with this at all. It doesn't really look that interesting either. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Not excited for Affliction at all. But like I said, this could easily be the top spec if it's overtuned. You know, just like anything, I guess. But Affliction particularly. Affliction's got a habit of sometimes just being really a menace. Balance. I think Balance looks like a lot of fun. But they have just baked new problems into this spec, and I don't really understand why. Well, it's for PvE, so PvP just kind of go by the wayside again, but they've got a new mastery, which makes them do more damage to targets with Sunfire or Moonfire, and then like half the tree is focused on Sunfire and Moonfire and like a Stellar Flare and stuff. So they've got all these dot talents in the tree that you're gonna have to end up picking some of. Yes, you definitely have to end up picking some of the dot talents, and it just, the spec all of a sudden has a huge reliance on dots, and the dots don't really do that much damage. But if the dots are not on the target, then you don't do a lot of damage. But they've got no dispel protection. Yikes. Like, it's just, yeah, that's, I can see this being kind of frustrating to play because of that. Yeah, the dotting, and yeah, Blizzard they said already that they don't want the dots to do a lot of damage. So they don't want the dots to be strong, they just want the dots to be necessary. So this new mastery and all this, it's just, you know, if they're not playing with like an Affliction Warlock or something to protect their dots, they're going to put all these dots up. They're just going to get cleansed. I guess they can put them up again, but then you're spending all these globals on just like Moonfire, Sunfire, maybe Stellar Flare, whatever, if that ends up being worth using. It's just going to be a weird, just kind of a weird place to take the spec, I think. You know, I don't really get the rationale behind doing that. I'm sure it's PvE related, but I don't know, weird. I think it's going to be C tier. The spec is kind of in trouble with the dot focus, I think. Unless it gets some kind of, you know, dispel protection, in which case that'd be kind of wild, but it would, you know, make it really good, I guess. Ferals. They've said ferals are under construction. You know, so kind of who knows. So maybe we'll make a little work in progress tier. Put Feral in there, since I think Feral's going to be like getting a new talent tree next week or something. Like Feral's getting huge changes, and unlike Shadow Priest, which like what it has looks pretty decent, Feral looked really bad. They're getting a lot of new stuff, trying new things, I guess. They did say they want Feral to be bleed focused instead of like Ferocious Bite focused, so they don't like want that to be an option. And it just depends on the meta how good that is. If that's a good thing to be or a bad thing to be. You know, like are rot comps and stuff good where, you know, ferals can like put the bleeds up on people and that's fine. Or if it's like a burst focused meta, then, you know, if feral has to do a bunch of dots to do damage, that's gonna kind of be trouble for feral. But we'll have to see how the meta shakes out, and, you know, see how the spec really ends up shaking out anyway. But feral, with how bad its tree has been, I am not. I would not bet money on the spec being good personally. I think the expansion's too close, and I think the talent tree they just got out for it looks okay, but I can just see the spec having issues. Honestly, that's just my feeling. But we're gonna put it in the work in progress tier for now. So survival hunter. Survival has got so many burst options in its kit. To me, the spec looks really unfun to play. Like, I don't like a spec with a simple rotation and then all of these like cooldowns. I'd rather have like more rotational abilities and one cooldown than, you know, I think it's got like 5 cooldowns or something crazy if you spec it like that. And it's also like cooldown stacking classes are just a disaster in PvP. Like, they either make the game unplayable or they themselves are garbage. It's just, you know, these Feast or Famine, you know, pop 5 cooldowns, I don't like that at all. But it is kind of, you know, it looks like it might be one of the, you know, strongest 100 to 0 specs in the game. We'll have to see. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think the spec has fundamental problems. When it's good because it's, you know, doing sickening damage, but it tends to be really fragile, which they haven't really remedied that. It's kind of got some issues with like sharing a tree with 2 ranged specs. So it's like general tree isn't getting the defensives that a melee would be getting. So it's just, I think the spec is messy, clunky. I don't like playing it at all. I guess we'll have to see. I don't like all the cooldown stacking, which that's a personal gripe I have with it, but this is my tier list, so, you know, whatever. But yeah, not excited for this spec at all. It could easily be S tier though. If one-shotting is the name of the game, this spec's got all those cooldowns. Surely it will be able to do it. So now, BM. Blizzard said they want to fix the bugs with pets, and they're gonna do that. And if they manage to do that, BM will be in a much better spot, because that'll just be nice. It'll be much nicer to be a BM player if they fix pet, you know, issues with pet bugs and pet AI. The pet bug is like that thing that makes you have 2 pets. Like, the bug with that is if you have that talent, it makes like your dire beast and your other temporary pets do less damage too. Which, like, the tree is really centered around that stuff. So if that bug makes it live, BM's going to be in a horrible spot. But surely they will not let that happen. So they said they're going to fix that. And they're going to fix pet AI as well, which is exciting for the spec. It looks like it's going to have some pretty good burst build paths and some good sustain build paths. So I think it's going to be pretty flexible. I think it's going to be pretty good. I'm going to put it in A tier. Marksman is forced into Lone Wolf, which makes half the general tree worthless. That sucks. That kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Don't like that. It's not a fundamentally powerful spec by any means. And it's another spec that really, it depends on tuning. Can it one-shot people? Yes. Does it one-shot people? Yes. It's going to be good. Does it not? It's going to have some trouble lining up all these aim shots and stuff. It's got some interesting options in its talent tree, but I don't really see the spec being that good. I think BM's going to be better, at least for the first season. So I'm going to put this in C tier. Enhancement. More options than ever, better mobility than ever, more utility than ever. It's fun and strong, and it's got a lot of interesting build paths in the spec tree, which gives it several ways to play. So this is a very easy S tier, the biggest S tier yet. Pretty much the same thing for Elemental Shaman as well. I'm not as excited for Elemental, just personally, but these specs, like Shaman is just historically, they screw over Shamans. But they are really doing Shaman right this time. You really can't find anyone who disagrees on that. These look sick, look like a lot of fun, and also they look quite powerful. Really, they've got everything in their kits that they need. It's going to be kind of crazy. So, Shamans are rising up. Assassin Rogue, lots of utility. It's got some great burst build paths and some sustained build paths as well, which that's that flexibility that I've been talking about, and it's able to use 4 poisons at once, which is going to be kind of wild. So it'll have actually quite a bit of utility, just from that. So that's, I don't know. I think it's going to be quite strong. I'm going to put this in S tier. I think it's looking really good. Sub. Again, it's got a lot of utility. People aren't excited about this. I don't really understand why. Maybe it's just, I guess a lot of, it's like Shadow Dance is in the general tree, so, and that's kind of like iconic subtlety rogue, and now all the rogues get it. So some of its identity is kind of being lost, but, it's extremely mobile, even for a rogue. It's got like extra Shadow Step charge. It's got like some Shadow Step reset stuff in its tree. I don't know. It looks, to me, it looks quite crazy. I'm going to put it in S tier. Really the way Rogue works, because all these are on the same class. Whichever one of these is better, one of these will fall to the B tier or whatever, or the A tier, I mean, because everyone will just play the spec that's better, because why not? But I think they both look extremely good. No idea which one's going to be better. They both have some really strong strengths to them. Outlaw. I think Outlaw looks... Outlaw. It's called Outlaw now. Outlaw looks... it's been years since it's been out. It's been Outlaw for years, and with Wrath Classic, I'm starting to call it Combat again. The spec seems really solid, but it doesn't look as crazy as the other two, so I'm putting A tier. Arms, it's got loaded with options and has access to pretty much everything that it's ever had access to that was good. Gonna put it in S tier. Fury seems really solid, but doesn't look quite as good as Arms to me. I'm going to put it in A tier. Unholy and Frost Death Knight. These are two that I never know much about. They rarely are that good, and when they are good, they tend not to be that good for long. Especially Frost, I think. I don't know. I feel like I don't see much of these, and when I do see them, they're not great. These are not I'm just not that familiar with DKs anyway. It's the only class that I don't really touch at all. I think Unholy looks pretty cool, looks pretty fun. I think it's definitely going to be better than Frost. And the options, they look great. It looks like it's got a lot of build paths, but it doesn't seem as crazy as a lot of the stuff in the S tier, in the general tree. The utility and stuff they're getting doesn't really seem too wild compared to everyone else. These guys, often are just garbage. They could end up being here. I'm going to put it in A tier because I think it looks good. I think it looks solid. I think it looks fun. Frost is getting a lot of changes, and probably going to see more. But it looks like it has access to everything it needs to do well. I'm going to put it in the work in progress tier though, because they've said it's a work in progress. It's going to get a lot of changes. I think it just received some, so we'll have to see how all that shakes out. So we'll see on those. We'll see on Frost, but DKs, just like I said, troubled history, and I don't know what to see on them. There's a good chance they're both not great. I think Unholy definitely is going to be the better of the two, though. Now these Demon Hunters. Havoc Demon Hunter. It loaded with options, has pretty much everything it's ever had, and these guys have been pretty strong several times. So very good signs for that. I think it's a pretty easy S tier. Almost certainly going to be extremely good. So that's it for the tier list. This is for Dragonflight. If anyone, I said that at the beginning, do not forget, this is the Evoker, DPS Evoker icon, okay? So please subscribe, comment if you want to argue about it. I love to argue with everybody. So let's argue. Anyway, I'll see you next time.